Hello and welcome to this tutorial where we will show you how to prepare an Archicad model with multiple zones for daylight analysis with VELUX Daylight Visualizer. A zone is in this case a virtual work plane on which the daylight is analysed, following the European norm on daylight. The work plane is required to be at a height of 850 mm above the relevant floor area and 500 mm from the nearest walls. There are different ways to export an Archicad model to VELUX Daylight Visualizer. The most simple method is to export your Archicad model to a SketchUp format, star.skp. However, star.obj, .dwg, and .dxf are also viable options. The SketchUp format ensures that the elements shown in VELUX Daylight Visualizer corresponds to the surface materials in Archicad. The imported elements in VELUX Daylight Visualizer will thereby have the same reflective and transmissive properties as the equivalent surface materials in Archicad. For example, the element glass clear fast has automatically been given a transmittance of 69%. This is because the surface material has been assigned this property in Archicad. RGB color codes lets us define the reflective properties of our surfaces. These RGB color codes can also be defined in Archicad. However, where VELUX Daylight Visualizer uses a percentage of red, green, and blue, Archicad uses a range between 0 and 255. For example, the paint light grey shows 0.659 in both red, green, and blue in VELUX Daylight Visualizer, but 168 in Archicad. It is the same grey colour since 65.9% of 255 is 168. Following the SketchUp export logic, we can create work planes and give them custom surface materials. Let's start by creating surface materials from the work planes. There are 4 bedrooms on the first floor in this house, and therefore we'll make 4 surface materials, one for each zone in each bedroom. Go to Options, select Element Attributes, and click Surfaces. We can browse through all available surfaces, but we can also create new ones. Let's create a surface material for the first zone by clicking New. We can simply start by duplicating an existing surface and afterwards make our changes. Let's call this surface W_bedroom1. VELUX Daylight Visualizer will automatically identify a surface as a zone if the element name is starting with W_. Now click OK. From here, we can define our surface material as we like, but since it will be used as a virtual work plane and not as a reflective surface, these settings do not affect the daylight results. For a clear visual separation, we can give the surface a red color. Let's also create surface materials for the other zones. This time, we can simply duplicate the surface W_bedroom1 and rename it to W_bedroom2 and continue this approach until we have 4 new surface materials. Now, we need to create the actual work planes. This can be done in 2 ways, with the slab or the morph tool. Start by navigating to a relevant plan view. Here, we'll use the first floor. With the morph tool selected, we can start by setting the elevation to 850 and then simply draw a horizontal plane from one corner of the room to the other. We can then offset the edges by clicking the Morph and selecting Offset All Edges in the option box. Then simply type 500 as the offset distance. The last step is to apply the surface material W_bedroom1. Do this by selecting the Morph and open the Settings dialog or press the shortcut Ctrl+T. Open the Model drop-down and enable Override Surface and choose the surface material W_bedroom1. The surface material is then applied to the work plane. Now let's look at how we can make a zone using the Slab tool. Select the Slab tool and start by defining the thickness and offset. We can set the thickness to 0 and offset from the ground to 850. Then draw around the room and offset the edges with 500 millimeters. To apply the surface material, go to Settings dialog, open the Model drop-down, and this time we must enable overrides for both the top, sides and bottom surfaces of the slab. When all three are enabled, we can link the surface material override by activating the chain to the right. Now simply select the surface material W_bedroom 2 and we are done. Continue this approach until all the work planes have been created. Let's export the model to VELUX Daylight Visualizer. Go to File and save as a SketchUp file. Import the model to VELUX Daylight Visualizer and start by checking if the scale is correct. If not, you can adjust the scale using the scale factor in the bottom. The surface materials are the same as in Archicad, as you can see from the preview in the upper right corner and from the element list under the Surface tab. The work planes we created to act as our zones have also been recognized as zones by VELUX Daylight Visualizer, as you can see from the tick mark in the zone under Properties. As you can see, the element names are based upon the surface names in Archicad. We can choose to change these surface materials to more generic names by using graphic override combinations. This works for all global surface materials, but not for object-embedded materials. However, we can still override these embedded materials through other means. If we, for example, want all the walls in our model to be the same and have the name Walls in VELUX Daylight Visualizer, then we can do that through graphic override combinations. First, we must make a surface material for the walls which can be used for the override. Open up Surfaces and create a new material for the wall override. Let's use a grayscale and give the walls 50% reflectance. Since 50% of 255 is about 128, we can input 128 in red, green and blue. To create a graphic override, go to Document, hover over Graphic Overrides, and select Graphic Override Combinations. Then click New to create a new combination. Let's add some rules. Click Add, create new rule. Now let's call this first rule Wall Export. Then click Edit Rules and define the criteria to only affect the walls. In Override Style, put a tick in Surface and choose the surface material created for the purpose. As you can see, we now overrode all the surface materials for the walls, and we can do the same for all other element types and thereby fully customize the names and reflectance values. Now, when we save the project in SketchUp format and import it to VELUX Daylight Visualizer, we can see that walls appear in the element list with a reflectance of 50%. Now, I will show you how to set up a daylight analysis with VELUX Daylight Visualizer. Again, start by checking to see if the scale of the model is correct. If not, you can adjust the scale with the scale function in the bottom of the screen. Then go to Surfaces and select the reflectance and transmittance for all elements. The materials will automatically have the same properties as defined in Archicad if you followed the steps in this tutorial. However, it is good practice to double-check. Also, check to see if the zones have been selected by looking for the tick mark in Zone under Properties. Now we can set the location and change the orientation. Either choose a city from the drop-down menu or manually define the longitude and latitude. The orientation can be set with numerical values or by rotating the north arrow in the middle of the screen. The Camera tab lets us choose between different views. I will use a plan view at 150 mm above the ground for this example. We can also set a custom output area with the Set Area function. We can set the render specifications, render type, and render settings in the Render tab. To set up a daylight factor analysis, go to Render Type and select Daylight Factor. Then we can set the resolution and quality. For this model, I will go with a high resolution and high render quality. For much larger models, it might be necessary to set the resolution even higher with custom inputs. We can choose what we want to render with the drop-down menu here. For example, we can choose to render both the camera plan view and zones. Initiate the simulation by pressing the Render button. Here we have the camera result. We can choose between two different view options, either false color or ISO contour. The legend for both view options can be customized by changing the minimum and maximum values. The Zone tab reveals the zone results, and we can browse through the zones by using the arrows. We can also generate reports for the zones, which contains all relevant information regarding the daylight results. The reports have an inbuilt feature where you can check if the zones complies with the recommendations given in European norm and the active house specifications. First, select a country and then choose either the European norm or active house. If we, for example, choose the European norm EN17037, we can check to see if our zones comply with the minimum recommended daylight level. We can also see the expected mean and median lux levels for each zone. From this initial daylight analysis, we can see that the daylight levels are below the recommended minimum. Let's improve the daylight by adding a few roof windows with VELUX's library for Archicad. Check out our YouTube series for more information about how to install and navigate the VELUX plugin for Archicad. The link is in the description. With the VELUX library installed, go to Skylight tool and open the Skylight default settings. Let's add some sloped roof windows. Within the product configurator, we can select the type of window and size. We can also choose materials for the cladding, frame, flashing, lining, and glazing. For now, these are embedded materials. However, we can override these embedded material names and surfaces by opening Surfaces and Overrides. Here, we can enable overrides and select the material we want to override with by following the same procedure as showed earlier in this video. I have prepared surface materials for the cladding, frame, flashing, lining, and glazing for this purpose. Now we can simply use these to override the embedded materials. OK, let's add some roof windows. Now that we've added a couple of roof windows, we should see much better daylight results. Let's re-export the model. It is easy to update a project with VELUX Daylight Visualizer. To do this, go to File and click Update Project. Now, simply select the newest exported version of your project. As you can see, VELUX Daylight Visualizer quickly updates the project, and we can now see the added roof windows. The Update Project function saves your settings, meaning that you do not have to redefine the surface materials and camera settings like you would if you were to re-import the model. Now, let's run a new daylight factor simulation. As you can see, we really improved the daylight levels. Let's look at the report as well. Here, we can confirm that the zones now comply with the recommendations given in EN 17037. This concludes our tutorial on how to prepare an Archicad model for use in VELUX Daylight Visualizer. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, VELUX Building Simulation Tools, for more tutorials and updates.